Imagine a single car worth more than a private jet, more than a yacht, even more than an entire mansion. These aren't cars you'll see on the street. They're treasures hidden in private collections, machines that only the richest people on Earth can even dream of owning. Today, we're counting down the 10 most expensive cars ever sold, each one rarer than a diamond, faster than its time, and soaked in stories of danger, glory, and legends behind the wheel. From Ferraris, built for champions like Fangio and Sterling Moss, to a Bugatti so rare it's called the Mona Lisa of cars, all the way to a Mercedes so valuable it sold for an earth-shattering $142 million. Buckle up, because what you're about to see isn't just a list of cars. It's a journey into the most exclusive automotive vault on the planet. And trust me, you won't believe what takes the #1 spot. At number 10, we're not just starting with a Ferrari. We're starting with a revolution. This is the 1957 Ferrari 250 Testarossa prototype, chassis 06666TR, the very first of its kind. Think about it. Before this car, there was no Testarossa. This was the machine that launched one of Ferrari's most successful endurance racing bloodlines. Why Testarossa? The name literally means redhead in Italian, a nod to the striking red-painted cylinder heads on its 3.0-liter V12 engine. That engine, a Tipo 128 LM V12, produced around 300 horsepower, enough to push this lightweight racer to nearly 170 miles per hour in the late 1950s. That speed, combined with its radical pontoon fender bodywork designed by Scaglietti, wasn't just eye candy. It was functional aerodynamics, helping cool the brakes during grueling endurance races. And this specific car? It wasn't some garage queen. It raced in events across Europe and America for nearly a decade, with Ferrari's own factory drivers behind the wheel. Imagine the history in that seat, the sweat, the danger, the victories. By the time it rolled onto the auction block in Pebble Beach in 2011, collectors knew this wasn't just another Ferrari. The hammer dropped at an incredible $16.39 million, setting a world record at the time for any car sold at auction. Why so much? Because this wasn't just buying a car. It was buying the first chapter of one of Ferrari's greatest stories. A piece of history you could start, drive, and hear scream down the road, just like it did in the golden age of racing. That's why the 1957 Ferrari 250 Testarossa prototype secures its place at number 10, not only as a collector's gem, but as the spark that lit the fire for decades of Ferrari dominance. At number 9, we have a Ferrari that isn't just rare, it's legendary. The 1955 Ferrari 410 Sport Spider. Now this isn't just another Italian beauty. This car was a purpose-built weapon, created for one reason: to dominate endurance racing on the world stage. Ferrari only built 2 factory racing examples, and this is one of them. Under its impossibly long hood sits a 4.9-liter V12, firing through twin spark plugs per cylinder. That's 24 spark plugs in total, producing a monstrous 400 horsepower. Back in the mid-1950s, that kind of power was borderline insane. But here's where it gets goosebump-worthy: the driver roster. This very car was raced by Juan Manuel Fangio, the 5-time Formula One world champion, and later by Carroll Shelby, the American racer who would go on to build the iconic Shelby Cobra and Mustang. Imagine owning a car with both Fangio's and Shelby's fingerprints in its racing history. That's not just provenance, that's automotive royalty. The car competed across America, including Sebring and numerous road races, where it carved out a reputation as one of the fiercest Ferrari sports cars of its era. And after decades of being tucked away in private collections, it re-emerged in 2022 at R.M. Sotheby's Monterey auction. When the final gavel struck, the price was $22,005. Why so much? Because this Ferrari is more than just metal and horsepower. It's a living museum of motorsport. A car that carried 2 of the greatest drivers of all time, that screamed at full throttle in the golden era of road racing, and that now sits as one of the most significant Ferraris ever sold. That's why the 410 Sport Spider earns its spot. At number 9, a legend forged on the track with a story money can barely buy. At number 8, we leave Ferrari behind and step into the world of British racing royalty, the 1956 Aston Martin DBR1. This isn't just another classic sports car. This is Aston Martin's crown jewel, the car that defined the brand's golden era of motorsport. Only 5 DBR1s were ever built, and every single one is legendary. But this particular chassis, DBR11, holds the most glory. Why? Because it was the first DBR1 ever made, and it raced at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1956. More than that, it became the foundation for Aston Martin's racing dominance in the late 50s. Behind its wheels sat some of the greatest drivers in motorsport history, names like Sterling Moss, Carroll Shelby, and Roy Salvadori. These weren't just racers, they were icons, and this was the car they trusted at full speed. Under the hood, the DBR1 carried a 2.5-liter straight six, later enlarged to 3.0 liters, producing around 250 horsepower. Doesn't sound monstrous by today's standards, but paired with its lightweight frame, it became a razor-sharp endurance machine, and it delivered. The DBR1 went on to achieve Aston Martin's most famous victory ever, winning the 1959 24 Hours of Le Mans and clinching the World Sports Car Championship the same year. So when RM Sotheby's put this exact DBR1 up for auction in Monterey, 2017, collectors knew it wasn't just a car, it was a piece of racing immortality. The final hammer price? $55 million, making it the most expensive British car ever sold at auction. Why so much? Because the DBR1 isn't just a machine. It's the story of a small British marque going toe-to-toe with Ferrari, Maserati, and Mercedes, and winning. It's the spirit of Aston Martin distilled into aluminum and steel. That's why the DBR1 takes the number 8 spot, not just as a collectible, but as the car that made Aston Martin a legend on the world stage. At number 7, we meet a Ferrari so rare, so exclusive, that even billionaires struggle to get their hands on one. The 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4 Nart Spider. Only 10 were ever built. That's it. 10 cars for the entire world. The Nart in its name comes from North American Racing Team, Ferrari's semi-official U.S. racing arm, run by the legendary Luigi Chinetti. He convinced Enzo Ferrari to chop the roof off the already gorgeous 275 GTB4 and create a Spider version for the American market. The result? One of the most breathtaking open-top Ferraris ever made. Under its impossibly long hood lies a 3.3-liter Colombo V12, producing around 300 horsepower and paired with a 5-speed manual gearbox. It was the perfect blend of Ferrari, performance and Italian style, wrapped in curves that still make jaws drop today. But the story that makes this car unforgettable is its place in pop culture. The Nart Spider famously appeared in the film The Thomas Crown Affair, cementing its reputation as one of the sexiest Ferraris of all time. And unlike most ultra-rare exotics, some Nart Spiders were actually driven hard, taken on road rallies, raced in period, and lived as Ferraris were meant to live. Fast forward to 2013. At RM auctions in Monterey, one of these 10 ultra-rare Spiders, kept in single-family ownership for decades, crossed the block. The room went silent as the bidding skyrocketed, finally landing at $27.5 million. At the time, it was the most expensive Ferrari ever sold at auction. Why so much? Because the Nart Spider isn't just rare, it's mythical. A car born from a handshake deal between Enzo Ferrari and his most important U.S. importer. A car that blends racing heritage, celebrity style, and Ferrari's V12 magic into a package so scarce that owning one is like holding a golden ticket. That's why the 275 GTB4 Nart Spider secures the number 7 spot, a rolling piece of Italian art, with a story as beautiful as its design. Taparo. Number 6, we have a car that was built for legends, literally. The 1956 Ferrari 290mm. This isn't just another Ferrari racer. This is the car Enzo Ferrari personally commissioned for Juan Manuel Fangio, the 5-time Formula One world champion, to compete in the Mille Miglia, one of the most brutal endurance road races ever conceived. Under its skin sat a 3.5-liter V12, spitting out nearly 320 horsepower, numbers that were monstrous for the mid-1950s. But this wasn't just about raw power. The 290mm was a lightweight, nimble predator designed for long-distance speed, where reliability and precision mattered as much as outright pace. And it delivered. The 290mm scored podiums in legendary events like the Mille Miglia, the Targa, Florio, and the Buenos Aires 1,000 kilometers. Fangio himself piloted it in period, cementing its status as a driver's car of champions. Fast forward to 2015. At RM Sotheby's in New York, one of only 4 290mm's ever built came up for sale. Collectors knew what was at stake: a chance to own a Ferrari with direct ties to Fangio, the Mille Miglia, and Scuderia Ferrari's golden era. The hammer dropped at a staggering $28.05 million. Why that price? Because this wasn't just a Ferrari, it was a time machine. Every rivet, every curve of its Scaglietti bodywork, every scream of its V12 carried the soul of mid-century motorsport. For collectors, the 290mm wasn't just about owning a car. It was about owning Fangio's Ferrari. That's why the 1956 Ferrari 290mm takes its place at number 6, a car that carried the greatest driver of all time into battle, and now stands as one of the most valuable racing Ferraris ever sold. At number 5, we're not talking about a sports car. We're talking about a Formula One legend, the 1954 Mercedes-Benz W196R. This is the car that brought Mercedes back into Grand Prix racing after World War II, and it came back with a vengeance. The W196R wasn't just a car, it was a technological statement. Designed by Rudolf Uhlenhaut, it featured innovations that were years ahead of its rivals. Fuel injection borrowed from Messerschmitt fighter planes, a desmodromic valve system that allowed the engine to rev higher and harder, and in some versions, even streamlined bodywork designed to slice through the air at terrifying speeds. Under the hood sat a 2.5-liter straight-8 engine, producing around 290 horsepower. Doesn't sound like much today? Remember, this was the mid-1950s, and, in the hands of drivers like Juan Manuel Fangio and Sterling Moss, it was utterly dominant. Fangio piloted the W196R to back-to-back world championships in 1954 and 1955, cementing both his legacy and Mercedes' reputation as an engineering powerhouse. What makes the car that sold in 2013 even more extraordinary is this: most surviving W196s were locked away in Mercedes' private collection or museums. But one example, chassis 0000654, slipped into private hands after its racing career. And when it came to auction at Bonhams in Goodwood, the world held its breath. The final price? $29.6 million. At the time, that made it the most expensive car ever sold at auction. Why? Because this wasn't just buying a car, it was buying the very machine that carried Fangio to victory in Formula One. A car that rewrote the rule book, humiliated its rivals, and announced Mercedes' return as a dominant force in motorsport. That's why the W196R sits at number 5. Not just a collector's item, but one of the most important Formula One cars ever built. At number 4, we have a Ferrari that looks like art, but was built as a weapon. The 1957 Ferrari 335 Sport Scaglietti. Only 4 were ever made. That's right, 4 cars for the entire world. And this wasn't some pampered showpiece. This was Ferrari at war, created to take on the deadliest endurance races of the 1950s. Under that impossibly curvy Scaglietti body sits a 4.0-liter V12 pumping out nearly 390 horsepower. In the 1950s, that made it one of the fastest cars alive, with a top speed of over 190 miles per hour, blistering for its time. Imagine hurtling down the Mulsanne straight at night, with nothing but drum brakes and headlights the size of coffee cans. That's the reality this machine was built for, and the drivers, legends. Sterling Moss raced this car at Sebring. Mike Hawthorne, who would go on to become Britain's first Formula One world champion, drove it at Le Mans. This car wasn't just in the races, It was at the center of motorsport's golden battles. Fast forward to 2016 in Paris, when this Ferrari crossed the block at Art Curial. The room buzzed with history. The gavel came down at an astonishing $35.7 million, making it one of the most expensive Ferraris ever sold at auction. Why so much? Because this isn't just a Ferrari. This is blood, sweat, danger, and victory molded into aluminum. It's the kind of car that collectors dream about but almost never get the chance to own. A car that carried the greatest drivers of its era, that pushed the limits of technology and courage, and that today stands as one of the crown jewels of Ferrari's racing heritage. That's why the 335 Sport Scaglietti holds the number 4 spot. A car so rare, so fast, and so steeped in racing lore that it's as much a legend as the men who drove it. At number 3, we step back in time to a car so rare, so beautiful, and so mysterious that it's often called the Mona Lisa of the automotive world. The 1936 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic. Only 4 Atlantics were ever created, and today, just 2 or 3 are known to survive. Each one was hand-built, sculpted like rolling sculpture by Gian Bugatti, son of company founder Ettore Bugatti. And unlike most cars of the era, the Atlantic looked like nothing else on Earth. Its body was made of an unusual alloy called electron, a lightweight magnesium-based material that couldn't be welded. So Bugatti used an exposed riveted seam running straight down the car's spine, from the front, across the roof, and over the rear. That spine, combined with the car's flowing fenders and teardrop curves, gave it an alien beauty. Part Art Deco masterpiece, part futuristic dream. But don't let the looks fool you. The 57 SC Atlantic was also a performance monster. Its supercharged 3.3-liter straight 8 pushed it to speeds over 120 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest cars of the 1930s. Remember, this was an era when most cars barely managed 60. The car that sold in 2010, privately but widely reported, went for a staggering $30 to $40 million depending on which source you trust. That makes it one of the most expensive cars ever traded, and arguably one of the most valuable objects in the entire world of collectibles. Why so much? Because this isn't just a car. It's rolling history. It's sculpture on wheels. It's a ghost of a bygone era. The Jazz Age, the Art Deco movement, a time when cars were as much about beauty as they were about speed. And here's the hook. One of the 4 Atlantics built has never been found. Some believe it's lost forever. Others think it's hidden away in a secret collection. If it ever resurfaced, experts say it could sell for well over $100 million, instantly becoming the most expensive car of all time. That's why the Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic takes our number 3 spot. A car so rare and so perfect, it's as much a legend as it is a machine. At number 2, we meet the car that many call the holy grail of the automotive world. The 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. Only 36 were ever built, each one painstakingly crafted by Ferrari's racing division. And they weren't built for showrooms or Sunday drives. They were built to win. The GTO was designed to dominate endurance racing in the early 1960s, and it did exactly that. In fact, the 250 GTO captured the 1962, 1963, and 1964 World Sports Car Championships, making it one of the most successful racing Ferraris of all time. Under its long, elegant hood lies a 3.0-liter Colombo V12, producing around 300 horsepower. But the magic wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the balance. Lightweight, perfectly tuned suspension, and aerodynamics sculpted through both science and instinct. This was a car that could be thrashed at Le Mans for 24 hours straight and still come back for more. But here's what makes the 250 GTO different from every other Ferrari. It's not just a machine, it's a membership card. Owning one is like joining the world's most exclusive club. Past and present owners include billionaires, tech moguls, and racing royalty, people who could buy almost anything but chose this. When you buy a GTO, you're not just buying a car, you're buying prestige, status, and an open invitation to the most private automotive events on Earth. The most famous sale came in 2018, when one example traded hands privately for around $70 million, making it the most expensive car ever sold up to that point. And rumor has it, some deals have been even higher, whispered in private between collectors. Why so much? Because the Ferrari 250 GTO is the ultimate fusion of beauty, rarity, and racing dominance. It's the kind of car that doesn't just sit. In a collection, it crowns it. That's why the 250 GTO takes the number 2 spot on our list. It may not be the most expensive car ever sold anymore, but ask any collector and they'll tell you, if you could own just one car in history, this is it. And finally, at number 1, we arrive at the most expensive car ever sold, a machine so rare, so untouchable, that it feels almost mythical. The 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupé. Only 2 of these cars were ever built. Not 20, not 10, 2. Designed by Mercedes' chief engineer Rudolf Uhlenhaut, this was essentially a road-going version of the legendary 300 SLR race car, the same machine that dominated sports car racing in the mid-1950s. But where the race cars were stripped for the track, the Uhlenhaut Coupé was built as a rolling showcase of what Mercedes engineering could achieve. The design alone is iconic. Long silver bodywork, razor-sharp lines, and those signature gull-wing doors that made it look more like a spaceship than a car. Under the hood was a 3.0-liter straight-8 engine capable of propelling it to nearly 180 miles per hour in 1955. To put that in perspective, most family cars of the era barely hit 70. This wasn't just fast, it was otherworldly. For decades, both examples remained locked away in Mercedes' private collection, never for sale. Collectors whispered about them, dreamt of them, but knew they would never change hands. Until in May 2022, something unthinkable happened. Mercedes decided to part with one. At an exclusive invite-only auction held in Stuttgart, the hammer dropped at a staggering $142 million. That number didn't just make headlines, it shattered them. Overnight, the Uhlenhaut Coupé became the most expensive car in history and one of the most valuable objects ever sold. Why so much? Because this isn't just a car. It's a one-of-two masterpiece, a symbol of engineering brilliance, and a chapter of motorsport history that will never repeat itself. To collectors, it wasn't just buying a Mercedes, it was buying the crown jewel of the entire automotive world. That's why the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupé sits at number 1, the rarest of the rare, the fastest of its time, and the most valuable car ever sold. And there you have it, the 10 most expensive cars ever sold. From Ferraris born on the racetrack, to a Bugatti that belongs in a museum, and a Mercedes so rare it shattered every record in history. What's clear is this: these aren't just cars. They're rolling pieces of art, symbols of speed, power, and prestige that only a handful of people in the world will ever touch. But here's the question. If one Mercedes can sell for $142 million, what's next? Could we see a car break the $200 million mark? If you loved this journey through automotive history's crown jewels, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because the next video will take you even deeper into the world of cars that most people can only dream of. This is more than horsepower. This is history, and we've only just begun.